Welcome, everybody. I suggest that despite the heat, we get started and take your paper to get a little bit cooler. Dear Renate Mayntz, dear Fritz Scharpf, who will watch us later from afar, dear students, dear faculty, staff, and friends of the Hertie School. It is my great honor to welcome all of you here today to this very special opening ceremony of the academic year 2024-2025. Today we are not only celebrating the start of another exciting year filled with opportunities for growth, discovery, and connection, but also the extraordinary work of two very special scholars who can look back on a lifetime of achievements, Professor Renate Mayntz and Professor Fritz Scharpf. You may have already noticed that Fritz Scharpf is not physically with us today. He unfortunately suffered from an accident that prevents him from making the journey to Berlin, but he will be able to watch the recording later on. And we, of course, send him all our well wishes for his speedy recovery. Dear Professor Mayntz, we are delighted and so proud to have you with us today, and we would like to thank you for now representing both your work and the work of your long-term colleague and friend, Fritz Scharpf. Before we return to your scientific contribution and to your life's work, let me address those whose journey is just starting and who we're thrilled to welcome here at the Hertie School, our students. A particularly warm welcome to our new class. We are thrilled to have you join us. Welcome to a place that embraces new perspectives, innovative thinking, and the diverse backgrounds of its own community. I would also like to welcome back all students, faculty, and staff members who are returning from a well-deserved summer break. It is your dedication, hard work, and compassion for one another that makes this institution so special and drive our university forward on its steady growth path. A warm welcome also to all our friends and guests who took the time out of their busy schedules to join us on a very hot day here in the Auditorium Friedrichstrasse. It's wonderful to have you here to celebrate this opening and to see our campus filled with life again. Before I proceed, I would like to introduce my colleagues from the Hertie School leadership team. Our Managing Director, Axel Beisch, and our Vice President and Dean of Executive Education, Andrea Römmele, will be here with me on stage today. In a few minutes, you will hear from Axel about our growing networks and the exciting future of the opportunity. Yes, come join me already. And the exciting future of our university before Andrea dives into the deeper foundation of our intellectual roots to explain what drives our work. Our Dean of Research and Faculty, Mark Hallerberg, and Dean of Graduate Programs, Turit Husted, cannot be with us today, but they send their regards and they wish all of you a very best start into the new year. As most of you know, last year was a very joyful anniversary year for us. Under the motto, looking back to move forward, we celebrated 20 years of the Hertie School. I could provide you with a long list of events and guests, but it would be a long list, and I think it is much more exciting to see it in images and to let the images speak for themselves. So I wanted to share a short video telling you about our celebrations last year. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you here celebrating our 20th anniversary.
The impulse towards democracy that we saw after the collapse of the Soviet Union has reversed.
Deswegen geht es darum, neue Wege zu finden, mit strategischen Partnern dafür zu sorgen, dass erstens die regelbasierte internationale Ordnung verteidigt wird, geschützt wird.
Ja, herzlichen Glückwunsch, Glück und Segen für die nächste Dekade. Hertie School ist etabliert, es ist eine Erfolgsgeschichte.
Liebe Hertie School, 20 Jahre Neugier und Innovation. Happy Birthday und auf die nächsten 20.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch, fruchtbare Jahre.
Happy Birthday, Hertie School.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch, Hertie School.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch, liebe Hertie School.
Happy Birthday, paljon onnea. Let's go for another 20.
Thank you. During the past year, we had multiple opportunities to reflect on our journey, a journey that started in 2003 with a class of 28 public policy students, 7 professors, and 17 administrative staff members. As you can see by looking around, these numbers have multiplied. Over the past 20 years, the founding idea of establishing a school of governance in Germany in the heart of Europe, with the goal of bridging academia, politics, and practice, has become an unparalleled success story of teaching, research, and outreach, which is now entering into its 21st year. Today, the Hertie School is a fully grown, real adult. And we know raising a child takes a village, as Hillary Clinton says, and adolescence is not always easy, but this institution has proven over and over again that it can overcome even the most challenging times. Our community is not only growing, it is also becoming more resilient every year. During the past 20 years, we have hosted countless public events welcoming current, past, and future heads of state, ministers, and innovative policy practitioners and renowned academics. 2 of these outstanding scholars are receiving our very first honorary doctorate ever today, another indicator of how much the Hertie School has matured. One of the core ideas this university was founded on is that excellent research provides the only solid foundation for excellent training. Our faculty and researchers are producing outstanding interdisciplinary and intersectoral knowledge. They take international perspectives with the goal of finding solutions to real-world problems. Over the past 2 decades, we have grown into a research powerhouse, which has experienced a growth spurt between 2016 and 2021, when we established 5 centers of competence and a data science lab, our 6th research center, to further sharpen our profile and showcase our contributions to addressing the most pressing issues of our time. For exactly this purpose, we're also committed to training young talents in academic excellence. Since 2012, over 60 PhD researchers have proudly received their doctoral degrees and went on to become entrepreneurs, advisors, professors, of course, and even one university president. The backbone of all of our research and teaching activities is our world-class faculty. Starting with only 7 colleagues in 2003, we are fortunate that our core faculty has now expanded to a dynamic and diverse group of 36. Of the most innovative thinkers in their respective fields. Their expertise is not only highly appreciated at conferences, at research events, but also by the media, government bodies, and in international institutions. But most of all, they are dedicated educators, diligent scholars, and supportive mentors who help shape the next generation of decision makers and thought leaders. In 2007, 28 of these bright young minds were the first to receive their master's degree in public policy. They left the Hertie School with a solid and value-based understanding of complex governance challenges and the necessary skills and tools to address these in practical and responsible ways. Only this summer, we released more than 10 times as many students into the real world, well-equipped for leadership positions in government, business, and civil society. Over the past years, we've also expanded our programs by adding the Executive Master of Public Administration, the Master of International Affairs, the Master of Data Science and Public Policy. And in addition, our executive education team now trains more than 1,000 professionals each year and helps them excel on a path of lifelong learning. To achieve our ambitions, we have learned to build on partnerships and highly value the precious collaborations we have developed with universities worldwide. Our partners provide exchange and dual degree opportunities for our students and researchers with nearly 40 institutions worldwide. International alliances like the European University Alliance Civica, the Global Public Policy Network, or the Association of Professional Schools and International Affairs, APSIA, provide us with the opportunity to promote the sharing of knowledge as a public good across borders and to come together with our international friends for fruitful exchanges and lasting connections, whether at a conference on another continent or in a virtual classroom. Reflecting on the Hertie School's early adulthood, we can be proud of what we've achieved, and we can be even more curious about what lies ahead. As we enter this new academic year, all of us are concerned about the political events that illustrate how deeply liberal democracy itself is now being challenged, not only in various places around the world, but also at our very front door. It is all the more important to promote open and liberal democratic values with an international and interdisciplinary education that bridges social science theory and policy practice, and to fully live up to our motto, understand today, shape tomorrow. I'm now happy to pass the floor to our Managing Director, Axel Beisch, who will provide you with an even better understanding of much of the Hertie School's growth path in such a short time and about the exciting future that lies ahead. Thank you.
Dear past presidents, dear colleagues, dear staff, dear guests, and first but foremost, dear students, be most welcome to this opening up the academic year. I'm not quite sure, how do I move the slide? Do I just press, Cornelia, or I just look this way? Here we go. Thank you. Talking about numbers is always difficult because, there are only so many numbers you can remember after a talk. It's about 7, they say, so I try to make it easy. They all start with a 3. And if you remember the 3, talking to the students now, if you at any time ask in the coming years about the Hertie School, just remember the 3 and that add a 0, 1 or 2 or 3 times to it, and you're always going to be right, and just explain them. The 3 or the third is the third decade we're entering in, and the 3 is also a third in terms of campus. I come to that in a minute. So we're entering the third campus Robert Koch Forum, hopefully in 2 years, and you're entering it. The 30 standing for faculty, 30 plus. We're at the moment, I think, 34 colleagues, the core faculty plus many more adjunct faculty. The 300 you've just seen was the number of graduating this summer. And 300 plus is standing for the group of students we're very happy to have enrolled. Right now, 336 is at the moment. We'll see whether the number stays. The 3,000 does also have to do with students. It's all you, meaning once you will be an alumni with us. So we are close to having 3,000 alumni here, out of which about 1,000, I think 200, 300 are in Berlin. A group I'm going to be talking about in a minute later. Then the 3 million, well, this is going to be big 3 now, is our executive education. We just surpassed the revenue of 3 million, which is quite something because we're really getting to the top level of mostly government and close to governmental institutions, training them. And the 30 million, as you might guess, is about the budget a little bit plus. So if you remember the 3, you're always more or less on the safe side. Next slide, please. Talking about buildings, this is where we came from, Schlossplatz 1, not too long and quite small. There's still a university in that building. It's called the ESMT, European School of Management and Technology. Dear colleagues, about 700 meters from here. And then we moved into the Friedrichstrasse, where we stand right now. We then enlarged a little bit, especially for research, the Alexanderplatz, which is at the Alexanderstrasse 3, I think it is in real. It's at the Alexanderplatz, at the Alex. In terms of if you're looking for the centers, if you look for PhD colleagues and some visiting professors, you should go over there. But the complete study time will be taking place in the Friedrichstrasse until June 26th, which is when we move to the Dorotheenstrasse, which is then the Robert Koch Forum, the new campus, and we will keep the Friedrichstrasse much smaller than now because the research side will be located here. And if we look into the next slide, you see what might be happening in 2 years if you take a professional year. If you haven't taken it, if you're going to go through 2 years, you're not going to see that as a student, but as an alum. So don't worry, you're going to see it. You might enter through that door here on the left, which is the 96. You might pass through a hallway and you might sit in the Robert Koch Hall and enjoying a lecture. So this is how it might look like. It will be much more beautiful because it's under renovation. Originally should cost 42 million. No worries, we're not going to pay for it. Or we'll pay for it somehow. We're not going to pay that sum. And right now it's 87 million. So that's somehow, if you build in Berlin, usually add a factor 2 or 3 to it, but no worries. We have negotiated a fixed price contract, so we pay about 20 euro per square meter, which is a decent price in the center of Berlin for the building for the next 20 plus 10, 30, another 30 years to come. Next slide, please. Yeah, and if I talk then about alumni, that's you. That's you, at least in 2 years, some for you in 3 years, usually some 80, 90 to 100 students take up some kind of professional year or internship, and so take literally a duration of 3 years to study here instead of 2. That's how many we are. You see the 3,000 members over there. In about 120 countries, a very active Berlin chapter, and I come to that in a minute. Next slide, please. Here you see how they divide up. So 2,700 plus the new alumni, that's an older number, will be about the 3,000. Private sector, third sector, public sector, and within the private sector, there is this yellow greenish part, which is public sector consulting, something very dear to many of you who want to enter the public sector but have some kind of difficulties with the rather static and undynamic, sometimes, administration we find in Germany. Next slide. That's very important, because for all of you, all the alumni network is open as of Monday and as of today, of course. And I see Nena here. Maybe you stand up just for 1 minute. Nena Grisheva is the Director of Alumni Affairs. Thank you, Nena. And with her, next slide, please, 1,200 alumni. Don't worry, not everybody's going to come to the summer party. It might be a bit too much. But many will be coming to James June Beer Garden on Thursday, September 19. And many of you should be coming because you will have the opportunity to connect for the first time, probably. And it's all open. They are in all kinds of businesses in Berlin, at administration, at nearly all levels, not minister yet, but getting close to it. And they should answer your requests or mails or phone calls. And in order to make it a bit easier, meet them, come there on September 19th on Thursday. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's it. You see here, we do walking tours, we do alumni branches, we do many other things. Organize this. The next one is for your mobile, but we're not going to use this one right now because you know it anyhow. Nena is here. We have it on our website. So thank you very much for listening. Do join the alumni. It's really for you. You are the alumni that are coming to go. And with that, I wish you all the best for your studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cornelia and Axel. Also from my side, a very, very warm welcome to the Hertie family. A warm welcome to you, Renate. Wonderful having you here. Also, all my best regards to you, Fritz Scharpf. I hope you recover fast. Great having you here with us virtually. But most importantly, welcome back to school, class of 2025, and welcome to Hertie, class of 2026. And I just want to emphasize what our president, Cornelia Wall, has already said. It's great that the hallways and classrooms are now vibrant again and that we are all back to school. I have the difficult task to start you off with the term governance, which my dear colleague and friend Kai will then elaborate further on, and what actually the term governance actually means and has meant for our school. Our school was founded in 2004. We just celebrated 20 years, had a wonderful anniversary year with great events. And two very visionary ideas were kind of the founding pillar of our institution. Our founding mothers and fathers saw a strong need to tackle major global challenges and major international global problems, not through hierarchical means, through government, but by linking and connecting with and to different actors, and in connecting different sectors in the service of the global public good. This is what we at the Hertie School call the tri- or multi-sectoral approach to governance. Looking back 2 decades ago when we started, our sort of role models were schools like the LSE, like Sciences Po, who are strong partners now and play a role in our exchange programs and also in our dual programs. Another big idea or vision at that time was actually to break through the stale recruitment patterns of the public sector. If you also look internationally, lots of public sectors at that time had a focus on recruiting young students coming out of law school or having studied economics, and that is something that already in 2004 we wanted to break through. But it was and is our strong belief that lawyers and economists will not resolve those policy challenges. Our next generation of public policy wizards need to be experienced in way more than law and economics. Data management, history, sociology, ethics, data management, leadership, to name just a few, are the challenges young public policy wizards need to have at their hand. To be very honest, and you see that on the slide here, we have been so confident in our governance approach, in our trisectoral approach, that we basically decided to drop the governance and only call ourselves the Hertie School, because governance is so much in our DNA that we thought, it doesn't even have to be part of our name anymore. But it, of course, is in our subtitle. We call ourselves Berlin's University of Governance. But let me turn this classroom around a little bit. I mean, you have signed up to study at a governance school. What do you think governance actually is? What does it mean for you? And if you perhaps could scan this QR code and just sort of type in your mobile device what governance actually means to you. I mean, you have most likely thought about this before you decided to actually attend a governance school. And your results or your ideas will show up in probably less than a minute. I read here accountability, regulation, decision-making. If I read this and I already look at my dear colleagues Anke and Kai, who teach the policy, who teach one of our core courses where it is about the policy cycle, and a lot of buzzwords I see on here, on the slide. I already linked to your seminars. Leadership seems to be very dominant when we talk about governance. Tackling societal issues, intersectoral leadership, very interesting intersectoral leadership. That's one of the issues I think a lot about currently. How do we actually lead in a world that has become so interdependent and is growing to be much more interdependent than we were used to 20 or 50 years ago? Wonderful. Thank you very much for your input. And that very nicely links to my next point. I mean, you already heard from President Woll that over the course of the last year, we have celebrated our 20th anniversary with very different events. And during those events, it actually became clear that the next generation of public policymakers is facing new challenges, which are not asking for new, but for additional skills. Governance, liaising with different stakeholder groups, no doubt remains key. We can only tackle the tremendous challenges ahead of us together, but it needs more. Today's politics is not only about managing current problems, about managing current crises. It also is about envisioning future challenges and getting ready now for what will happen in 20 or 30 years. If you look back, we do have to ask ourselves, why didn't we do something about climate change way earlier? Why has urban housing become such a problem in the last decade? Why are demographic challenges hitting us now? Why were we so short-sighted in the past when it comes to our energy dependence on geopolitical adversaries? To all who say that this is easy to judge through the review mirror, I respond, in many ways we actually knew or should have known what was coming, but we reacted too late and failed to forecast promptly. That's what I mean with politics also has to think way ahead. It is about our world of tomorrow. Let me stress a last point that is very dear to my heart, and Cornelia has already alluded to that. A school of governance needs to be more as an institution that thrives for excellency in research and teaching, more than a place educating the leaders of tomorrow. In today's world, where democracy is at stake, we need to be an engaged school. We need to be a school where we stand up for democracy together, where we as a voice are heard outside, and I'm very much looking forward to doing that with all of you together. It is my dear pleasure now to introduce you to Professor Kai Wegrich, a dear friend and colleague who will dig deeper now in the very influential work of our two prominent guests today, Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf. The floor is yours, Kai.
Dear President Woll, dear guests, students and colleagues, dear Professor Mayntz, and in absence, dear Professor Scharpf, I won't repeat the warm welcome because it's really too hot, isn't it, here? So I hope we can still manage and make that interesting. But it's really very hot, and up here in particular. It is my great and deeply felt honor to introduce to you Professor Mayntz and Professor Scharpf as the first ever honorary doctorates of the Hertie School. It is also a very humbling task that comes with a good amount of nervousness and excitement, I have to confess. But it's also a great joy because it gives me the opportunity to again dive into the core concepts on which our School of Governance is built on, and to share my insights today, and especially with the students. Professor Mayntz and Professor Scharpf, your research over the decades is the intellectual foundation on which the Hertie School is built. Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf have, individually and jointly in their collaboration, developed, constructed and built the field of public policy in Germany and internationally. Your research, Professor Mayntz and Professor Scharpf, and writing has been the kind of nutrition or diet on which many of the colleagues here have been growing up academically. For many of us on the faculty and former colleagues, from Presidents Michael Zürn, Henrik Enderlein, Mark Hallerberg, and Cornelia Woll, to Markus Jachtenfuchs, Anke Hassel, and to Ruth Husted. You have been either academic teachers or an inspiration for the work and the thinking. For us, collectively, your work continues to shape, provides our intellectual foundation and thereby continues to shape what is distinct about how we think about the public and its problems. What I try to do is highlighting in very broad strokes some of your achievements, and I try to do that by sketching the intellectual development that has shaped how we think about public problem solving and governance. And I start with the biographies briefly. Before becoming one of the most eminent social scientists, Renate Mayntz, who was born in Berlin, first studied chemistry at the Wesley College in the US, but I have read that there was one course in sociology in the program as well, but the major was in chemistry. She gained her doctorate in sociology from the Free University here in Berlin in 1953, where she also gained her habilitation and became a professor in 1965. Later on, further stations of professorships were the Hochschule für Verwaltungswissenschaften, Public Administration School in Speyer, Germany, and then the University of Cologne. Her early focus was on community power and the role of local parties, of parties at the local level, and then on organizational sociology with very important work on Max Weber and the theory of bureaucracy. For many of us in the field of public administration, your work continues to be a foundation. So this here is a German UTB textbook titled Soziologie der öffentlichen Verwaltung, authored by Renate Mayntz, and that was the first textbook I bought as an undergraduate when I was studying some time ago as well in Hamburg. In 1985, Renate Mayntz became the founding director of the Max-Planck-Institut for the study of societies, where several of the colleagues I mentioned have gained their doctorate. In 1986, Fritz Scharpf joined her as co-director of the Max-Planck-Institut. Born in Schwäbisch Hall, Scharpf studied law and political science in Tübingen and Freiburg. He went to Yale 2 times, once in 55 and then in 64 until 66 again as an assistant professor. In between, he completed his German law degree and his doctorate in law at the University in Freiburg. After the Yale period, he completed his habilitation also in Freiburg and became professor for political science at the new university in Konstanz am Bodensee. In Konstanz, he built the study program in public administration, which, if you study how it looked like in the late 1960s, looks remarkably similar to our early Masters of Public Policy program. Dear students, if you ever wondered why in the Master of Public Policy, I think in the data science course as well, Simon, right, is a core course in law and governance. You can trace back the roots of that idea to what Fritz Scharpf was conceiving at Konstanz and what he also actively brought into debates when the Hertie School was created. In a way, Fritz Scharpf is also a Berliner because he moved to Berlin to the Social Science Center in 1973. The Wissenschaftszentrum, the Social Science Center Berlin, is also a child of the late 1960s and maybe the biggest non-university social science research institute, and there he was a director and research professor later. And then, as I already said, in 1986 he joined Renate Mayntz in Cologne as a co-director of the Max-Planck-Institut, and both stayed there until then. On the collaboration between Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf, this exceptional and close and amazing collaboration between the two did not start in the 1980s, but also already in the late 1960s. Let's try to remember the vibe, the atmosphere of the late 1960s. This was the time of expanding state activities, of competition between the systems of the West and the East, and of course also of geopolitical confrontations. And it was the time when policy analysis took roots in many Western governments. In the US, President Johnson initiated the war on poverty as part of the Great Society program and brought policy analysts from think tanks such as the Rand and Corporation and Brookings into government. In Germany, the long post-war period and the dominance of the center-right party of the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, in government ended, And then the first so-called Grand Coalition of the CDU with the Social Democrats, SPD, started, which then led to SPD-led government in a coalition with the Liberals. The government at that time thought about how to tackle the challenges that society was facing in the context I was mentioning. And the German government wanted to change how government and bureaucracy made policy and how bureaucracy was managed. Already during this first Grand Coalition of 66 to 69, the government set up a reform commission charged with developing concepts and proposals for improving how ministerial bureaucracy developed and formulated policies. The Reform Commission was composed of higher civil servants and a range of scholars who later became household names in public policy and management. And the leading scholars in the Reform Commission, you guessed it, were Renate, Mayntz, and Fritz Scharpf. This commission allowed Mayntz and Scharpf to empirically study how the ministerial bureaucracy actually takes decisions, how policies are made in the engine room of government. They carried out and led case studies analyzing how policies were actually formed and formulated. And in these case studies, they discovered the pivotal policy-making role of the ministerial bureaucracies, and in particular, the very small specialized working units in these ministries. Theoretical concepts that are still with us, like negative and positive coordination, but also reform concepts like active policy-making resulted from these case studies. Active policy-making was a concept that aimed at strengthening the political leadership capacity of the ministerial bureaucracy, to put executive politicians in a position to move beyond the policy-making style that is only reacting to short-term demands, in particular from lobby groups. At the core of active policy-making was the idea to equip executive politicians with the intelligence and support to take decisions with a longer-term outlook, looking at Andrea now. Current discussions about evidence-based policymaking and bringing data scientists into government remind me of this reform period. But it turned out that longer-term planning often did not lead to intended results, and more intelligence did not lead to better policymaking. In sync with the new development in policy research internationally, Mayntz and Scharpf explored the implementation of public policies as the key site or moment of success and failure. Studies on the enforcement of environmental policy and the implementation of labor market programs showed not only the importance of administrative capacities, but in particular the significant role of societal and political actors during implementation. For example, when the enforcement of environmental standards is subject to bargaining on the local level between the companies, politicians, and enforcement agencies. Or when the networks of firms, unions, and the labor market administration drive success of labor market activation programs. To name just two examples. Implementation, it turned out, is much less a hierarchical top-down process than expected. It is actually the continuation of politics at the street level. But something else came out of these studies on policy formulation and implementation. Namely, that it does not make too much sense to view policymaking as a process that starts in the halls of political institutions and is delivered at the street level. The process is way more lateral, less hierarchical, and more interactive. Bargaining, collaboration, and conflict do not only shape implementation, they also characterize the whole policymaking process. Moreover, when looking at individual sectors, healthcare, welfare, telecommunication, the labor market, it became evident that the interactions between different actors in these sectors are shaped by institutional rules. These rules shape the interaction of the actors, who has a say, who has what to say, who has a stance, and the concept of governance was developed to look at, to analyze these sectors as a mix of state, hierarchical intervention, networks, and market mechanisms. Let me try to underline this quite fundamental shift in understanding of public problem solving that this conceptual development entailed. Policy analysis and research started out with the idea to optimize policy design with more intelligence, and found out that the process of policy making is better captured as a multilateral interaction in the web of government than a hierarchical process. Implementation research resulted in further departure from the traditional understanding of policy making as a hierarchical process. And under the governance paradigm, the patterns of interactions between state and non-state actors and how they are regulated shape how public policy problems are addressed. Of course, policy design, intelligence, data, good management, right implementation do matter, and they continue to do so. But if you want to summarize this intellectual development in the form of a mantra, it could go something like this. Policy design and instruments matter, actors and institutions matter more. Many more aspects, dimensions, and plots characterize Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf's work. Just to mention Renate Mayntz' work on large technical systems and the sociological theory of modernization, part of her work that I always like very much to read. And Fritz Scharpf's highly impactful work on federalism and multi-level governance in Germany and Europe, the joint decision trip. And I think I recognized one of the co-authors of the early work on cooperative federalism, Bernd Reissert, here in the room. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to present these contributions in detail, but I trust that you feel now curious enough to check them out in our library. Please allow me to finish with one final remark concerning the nature of intellectual debates that characterize maybe in particular the 1980s and 1990s. Mayntz and Scharpf had a veritable intellectual opponent in Niklas Luhmann. This highly eminent German sociologist developed the theory of social systems. According to this theory, in a nutshell, increasing complexity of society leads to functional differentiation and the development of social subsystems that function according to their own logic and code of communication. The theory came with a nihilism regarding the possibility of government intervention into such systems. Policy interventions, for example, in the economic system, could lead to not much more than the flickering of a disco ball. You would say a club ball doesn't work in English. Yeah? A ball that you have in a dancing hall with an irritating effect at best. Scharpf and Mayntz have engaged intensively with the work of Luhmann and his followers, insisting and demonstrating that political governance is possible and working on defining the conditions under which it is possible. For example, the aggregation of interest by intermediate organizations, lobby groups, is considered to be a factor contributing to the possibility of steering because it allows negotiations and credible commitments to follow through with policies that have been agreed upon. And I remember this article from you in 1987, Frau Mayntz, in thinking about this argument. In 1988, Luhmann and Scharpf had a public controversy at the Political Science Conference of the German Association to debating these issues. Such debates might seem pretty general, maybe even abstract from today's perspective, in particular here, where we are concerned with addressing tangible problems and teaching the skills to solve them, and where we sometimes exhibit a little bit of an impatience in coming up with solutions, if I may risk to say that. I disagree. I think that the conceptual tools and the intellectual mindset, one that combines fundamental insights about political governance and their societal foundations, with their application to concrete policy fields and issues, is what helps us to avoid the risk of technocracy. Technocracy, the idea that well-conceived policies, those based on the right data, can ever be sufficient for public problem solving. In understanding today and shaping tomorrow, the work of Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf remains fundamentally important as a guiding post of how we think about public problem solving in a political world. It was thus a natural choice for us to select both of them for our first ever honorary doctorate. It is a bow to the scientific work they have accomplished, a recognition of the strength of internationally connected interdisciplinary scholarship rooted in Germany that provided the key intellectual foundation for building the Hertie School. And it's also a heartfelt thank you from the Hertie School faculty on behalf of all the generations that have followed and could build on your insights. Please give both scholars a round of applause. Thank you very much. If I remember the stage directions correctly, it's now for me to call on President Woll and Renate Mayntz to join me at the stage, and we have a newly designed scarf for the doctorates, and Frau Mayntz will receive one of them.
Gibst ihr denn? Einmal umhängen und dann kannst du es wieder ausziehen. And I would also like to call Michaela Kreinfeld and Markus Jachtenfuchs up on stage with us. Dear Renate Mayntz, you have received many distinctions in your life, and you've also received honorary doctorates, 3 previous honorary doctorates from the University of Uppsala, from Paris-Nanterre University, and from our Civica partner, the European University Institute in Florence. But today you are receiving your first ever German honorary doctorate, and I am very, very pleased that we're able to award you this doctorate here in Berlin. As you've heard from Kai's presentation, you are a true Berliner. You've been born and raised in the city. You received your high school diploma in Berlin. You completed your studies with a doctorate in a freshly founded small university that was a bit of a gamble to study in, the Free University of Berlin, in a subject that most Germans knew nothing about, sociology. So 2 gambles. It was also at the Free University that you passed your habilitation and you held your first professorship. You ended up leaving the island that was West Berlin to become more closely engaged with one of the objects of your study, the state, or as you prefer to call it, the political administrative system, for which a professional school had just been created in Speyer. And you started working in Speyer, and then you moved closer to the new Western German government that was working with full speed in a faraway town called Bonn. And clearly, the Max-Planck-Institut in Cologne, Bonn's sister town, was the ideal place to study it comfortably. Fritz Scharpf has also close connections to Berlin, in particular through the directorship at the WZB that Kai mentioned from 1973 to 1986, which he left only for you to come to Cologne and to join the MPIFG, Max-Planck-Institut for the Study of Societies, as a co-director. Fritz Scharpf in particular was instrumental in developing the project that led to a school of governance in the new German capital in Berlin, and he served and accompanied our development on the Board of Trustees from 2003 to 2009. So for both of you, I am happy to see that we're somehow closing a circle with the honorary doctorate you're receiving from us today. And for you, Renate Mayntz, I'm happy to add, welcome back home. And we would like to discuss your work with you, and I'm very pleased that I have Michaela Kreinfeld and Markus Jachtenfuchs join me here on stage, because honorary doctorates are not discretionary decisions. They're a complicated vote that goes through our gremien, a vote by the Hertie School faculty and our Senate. And so I'm very happy to have the faculty lead the discussion, and I will hand over the floor to Michaela Kreinfeld first, and then to Markus Jachtenfuchs to ask you questions.
Yeah, let me start by saying that it's a great honor to be here with you on the podium. And I'm very eager. I have a lot of questions and to discuss these questions with you. And I thought I'd start maybe with a very big question, overarching question. And when we advise our young scholars, they always ask them to come up with a research agenda, with a puzzle. And when I look at your research agenda, I think there was one big puzzle that followed you throughout your career, and that is the governance of complex systems. And that can be different kinds of systems. It can be healthcare, it can be energy sector, and my impression was always you approached it in a very optimistic way, that these systems are manageable. And I wonder how you think about that today, about certain systems. And of course, I know that you also worked in transportation, and I must say I had sometimes lose the hope in that respect. Last week I had to go to a defense in Oxford, and I had missed my flight because of Zug fällt aus. And in terms of transportation systems, one wonders if complex systems are really manageable. So what is your view on the matter of the management of complex systems?
Does it work? Okay. I think to talk about the management of complex systems is an hopeful illusion, because complex systems have a tendency to produce results that none of the participants ever wanted. And I think over the course, I think even of my intellectual career, I have come to that pessimistic conclusion when, in general, in social science and so on, we were still talking about management of complexity. The problem really is, how can you manage complexity? Do you even understand what it is? And I sometimes have the feeling that at least over the past 50 years or so, the general situation has changed in such a way that our earlier optimism that had to do also with a certain hierarchical image of society, with an elite and a subservient mass or so. This has completely disappeared. We have a very different kind of image of what society is, and the issue there is what we have said. It is not only complex, it is complexity in such a way that it produces undesirable results.
That's a pessimistic view on that. Maybe if we can have a follow-up question on the challenges of today's complex societies. I was actually, when I read one of your very recent paper, actually published in a sociological journal that you were citing actually Ulrich Beck. I was surprised that you do, and he maybe for those of you who don't know, in the 1980s, 1986, he wrote this book Risk Society and was very concerned about uncertainty in society. And thinking back to the 1980s, that was actually a very peaceful, very unrisky, and very society of low uncertainties, low employment uncertainties, and so compared to the many overlapping crises that we're dealing with, the global financial crisis, Ukrainian war, Corona, and the many things that we are grappling with at the time. So you already were very pessimistic in terms of managing complex systems. So what is your view in that, in these times that we're living in? What are the most important challenges and how do we manage actually?
I think one of the most important challenges is really an intellectual one, because there are very few persons that can understand the management problems of that complexity. We talk about complexity, okay, fine, we talk about complexity, but what do you mean by that? And what does it mean that in certain countries, and now I'm talking about countries, not just Europe, in certain countries you have different kinds of partials of societies. Societies don't necessarily cohere, and they evolve in a very dramatic way, which we normally learn in the newspapers that's happening. But we know exactly what is going on in the Far East, and we know what is going on and I think the challenge before us is really to have a better understanding of the structural makeup of this world system.
Okay, so Luhmann was right in the end, that there are some systems that have their own logic. So you wouldn't argue against him as you used to do in the 80s. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, the point is really you learn even by looking at reality. You learn, and you suddenly find out that certain premonitions or ideas that you had about management, governance, and so on, turn out.
I think we should wait a couple of seconds. Yeah, okay. Friedrichstrasse, that's always a bit noisy.
Okay. You are facing problems, and the question is, to what extent are our social science, intellectual approaches able to deal with these problems?
Okay, yeah.
Cognitively.
No, absolutely, and I think that's a very important point. So I have the Luhmann is hiding in my bookshelf, and I think it's hidden, but I should probably get it out then. A very important point. Maybe I can have a follow-up question on that, because I think you're addressing an important point in terms of what we have to do in terms of theory, disciplines, and all that, and how we should, by which tools, by which theories we can solve our contemporary problems. And if I look at the young scholars that we have, we've just established a master in data science. And if I look what they do, our students, many times they are very crunching data, they're using the new tools, taking weeks to understand where there are code is stuck and all that. And in that sense, of course, the question is there too little progress in terms of theory development, in terms of thinking about moving theory ahead? And if you think about that in my own discipline, sociology, I have the impression there's not much advancement. I was citing back, you were talking about Luhmann, the old classical scholars, but there hasn't been much theory development recently. What we see basically is that in behavioral economics, they're actually very strong in terms of theory, and that these theories seep into political science, they seep into sociology, but we don't have anything that we can offer. We don't have any grand theories anymore. And do you think there is hope, or what are your visions of how do we move ahead?
Actually, I'm too old to have visions about the future. No, the point really is, in many of our discussions, we are thinking about Europe. But the world is much larger than Europe, and we sometimes forget what is happening in the eastern part of Russia, what is happening in China, what is happening in Tanzania, and so on. We simply disregard this because most of our theories are fixed on Europe, on well-known, understood systems. But there are other societies where the dynamic, the interior dynamic, is different from the interior dynamic of well-organized systems like most European societies are. Still, in spite of all the difficulties they're running into recently.
I think that's a critique that we also get from our students, that we should expand very much and cover other regions of the world and not focus too much on Europe. I think that's a very important message that we get. I think maybe Markus from...
Yeah, I think I can easily take up your topic of complexity and difficulties of governing today. When I think back to the founding years of the Hertie School, we really thought, what is our main message to the students? I think we had a discussions once where we thought, what we do not want is to educate the cynics, you know? The student who really think governance isn't possible, and even if you achieve it, you achieve unintended consequences, and these unintended consequences are neither legitimate nor efficient, you know? So my question is, and what we then have is, we have a great theoretical justification for cynicism. So we didn't want that, you know? So my question is, who governs really, you know? I mean, the great breakthrough for me of the approach that the Max-Planck-Institut with the Scharpf and you pioneered is to make this move from top-down hierarchical governance, the state is alone, to governance involving more actors, really plausible and empirically visible, you know? But don't we throw the child with the bathwater somehow of finding out that everybody is somehow involved, everybody is a stakeholder, parties, NGOs, media, etc., etc., etc. Can we say something more about this? Who are really the core actors in modern governance? Where should we focus on analytically and possibly also politically?
No, you're asking for a normative statement, and I'm not going to make such a normative.
I'm asking for an empirical statement. Can we say some actors are more important for effects than others?
Well, obviously so. I mean, actors who decide on the logic, the rules by which other persons operate are more important. And we have to look at them. But we have to ask, what exactly are the fields in which these issues are being debated at the moment? And the question is really, what are the issues? If you ask corporate governors or so, or if you ask politicians, just look at the present political parties we have. If you ask at the same time scientists, you will find that they have completely different perspectives on reality. And the problem is, how will you bridge these differences in order to find what? To find a general conclusion? No, you will not find it. You will find a discussion of different viewpoints, and the question is, how will we grapple with the consequences of that discussion.
Okay. Hi.
Is this on? Yeah. I find this really interesting. I hope you do as well. Because on the one end of the critique of the governance approach, we have the critique of there's too much optimism. Luhmann had it right. And let's go back to the basic and understand what complexity really entails. Yeah? My kind of household definition is there's interdependence, but also autonomy in decision making, which leads to the unintended effects of that. And then we have Marcus chipping in with the argument that we have overlooked power, right? And looking at your biography for today, I realized that you were engaged in community power studies very early on, and this was the debate about who governs. Right, and there was then a controversy about how to study who governs. Can you look at decisions? Are not non-decisions more important? And then are not discourses even more important than decisions and non-decisions? The 3 or 4 phases of power. And I wonder if that is maybe another critical consideration of the governance approach, that it is a little bit oblivious of the power. And maybe we could go back to the studies of Dahl and others in the 1960s and go back and students doing studies of power, urban power in that context, and to find out who governs. Because I share that critique a little bit, that we have been liking this non-hierarchical way of seeing a little bit too much, maybe.
In part, what I've been saying now is really a reflection of what has happened most recently in politics and economics. Because if you look at my early writings, I talked about organizations and their influence, and about political parties and their influence. This note of skepticism that you say, do all these different voices still form a chorus, or do they not? This is really the result of looking at what has happened, not only nationally, internationally, over the past, let's say, 10, 15 years, not more. I think that this has been a very decisive movement, and one part of this movement, which is, I think, very interesting, is that our classical images of hierarchy, of different classes and so on, is completely changing now, because we have, and this is something which you can really experience every day, we have movements of new actors that are forming, and they are forming because the system that links them together has become broken.
I may perhaps join in on this question of whether and how can we govern. You know, one of the things that struck me sometimes when I read it for the first time was Juncker's curse. You know, Juncker is Jean-Claude Juncker, the former Prime Minister of Luxembourg and former President of the European Commission, and he once said on the occasion of the global financial crisis, "We all know what to do. We just don't know how to get re-elected once we have done it." You know. And what he means by this, I think you can generalize this a little bit, that we may be entering an era where we are in the situation that we can conceive of problems that can be accomplished by executive, by networks, by governance mechanisms, but the public doesn't want it. The public doesn't like it, you know? Right. And if you look at the elections in Thuringia and Saxony, this is perhaps an indication of that trend. Would you agree with that diagnosis that we are, so to speak, face the risk of increasing problem-solving gaps? We have problems that we really should solve, but we cannot solve for some systematic reason because, so to speak, of the revolt of the masses, if I'm grandiosely.
No, the main question would be, what is it that prevents it? You're speaking about problems. What are the problems? This is really the question. I mean, where do the forces that come to disturb something that once looked like an equilibrium, these forces we have to diagnose. And they are forces that have to do with social structure, they have to do with technology, technical development, very much so, technical development, something completely neglected in most of social theory. You can see, if you talk about the danger of Russia throwing a nuclear bomb, we are very close. We are talking about that as a possible danger. And there are quite a few people who believe that it may well happen. So what does that really mean?
I mean, speaking about technological development, I remember once having had a discussion with Volker Schneider, who worked at your institute on technological system, and I asked him, so Volker, do you really think technological process in and by itself is a driving force of societal change? It's not being caused by societal developments, that favor it, but it's an independent causal force. And he said, yes, Marcus, I believe this is the case. So technology is a driving force. Would you share this?
Not in this simple form.
I perhaps have
really
simplified it too much to give justice to
okay. No, because you always have to think about technology and the persons who handle the technology. And in this connection, you really get the essence of the dynamic. It's not technology, it is what people are doing with it and what they can do. And then you look at a highly stratified, differentiated society, and you can see how different identifiable actors follow different courses, and we sometimes do not know what is going to happen next.
If I may come in with a short question as well. Renate Mayntz, it's once been summarized that your life has been marked by two very important ruptures. One was World War II, like most people in your generation, and the second was the move to the United States, where you discovered a different society and different approaches, and thinking about this has had a lasting impact on your work. And I am wondering, I think one of the articles summarizing your work is called The Fragility of the Social World, Social Orders. And I'd like to ask a question about this fragility, because you have seen social systems disappear entirely, and we were just in the gloomy part where we were concerned about a Russian nuclear attack or something terrible happening. With the perspective of studying fragility that you have had as a sociologist, what are the developments currently, possibly with respect to the democratic orders we live in, that you're most concerned about?
You're really asking a kind of a policy question, what to do. I am not telling anything because I do not know the answer, We have to, I think, possibly occasionally admit that our recognition, our social science recognition of what is going on out there in society is limited. It is strictly limited. And I think we have to simply recognize this, which doesn't mean you stop working. Also, it is a challenge. And you have to try and make the next step. But the next step not necessarily is the overall profound solution.
Maybe I can ask on what our task is, and also ask you questions on your biography, on whether we should stay observers or whether we should act as a scientist. Here at our school, and also myself, we are very active in policy consulting. I've been in the family report, writing the family report for this legislation period, and had to observe how the Kindergrundsicherung failed, and it was a very interesting experience for me also to understand the mechanisms and the reasons for the failure. But of course, we tried my best to advise and give recommendations. So how in your career, and I know you also did advise policymakers, so what is your experience from that? Is because you just said, well, we don't have so much influence and maybe we shouldn't have influence, or?
No, this is really a basic question and something I have been grappling with all the time. No, I have never joined a political party. I have never run for office, for political office or so. I have not held the illusion that as an actor, as a consequent actor, acting on society, I could make much. I have withdrawn into the intellectual abbey of analyzing what is happening and trying to formulate the reasons. I'm not the one who is going to act on what I formulate.
Renate Mayntz is an empirical social scientist and has always moved between the empirical examples she studied and grand theories. It is still a very important foundation for our work to share some of the skepticism, humility, some of the doubts that one has when reading the work of Renate Mayntz and Fritz Scharpf, and we would like to thank you again, congratulate you for the honorary doctorate you've received, and I'd like to ask the room again to have a round of applause to Fritz Scharpf, who's not here, and Renate Mayntz. And before I let you go entirely, let me just say one word about what is possibly an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed, because we've spent a lot of time speaking about your work as a social scientist. But I'd just like to mention a topic you usually wave your hand over. You're also a female social scientist, and you're a female social scientist in a generation where that was a very unusual thing. And I'm projecting a picture behind you that you can see here of 1985, when you took the directorship of the Max-Planck-Institut in Cologne, and you're speaking here in the social science and humanities section, and you can see just out of this picture what it took to have the scientific career you've just been presented at that time and age, at a moment where it was not at all a usual thing to go to the United States to study. Maybe that doesn't seem extraordinary to you because you're all now traveling. It was extraordinary at the time. Maybe it doesn't seem unusual to you to have a woman in this career, but back in these days, a lot of Germans became Frau Doktor because they married a Herr Doktor and were able to carry his title. So the outstanding achievements you've had were double outstanding also because you've had to do them as a woman, and you broke a lot of first hurdles for many of us following you afterwards, and I'd also like to thank you for that.